and welcome to another session with us at Aucademy. I am Dr. Chloe Farahar. I am a white person with a shaved head, giant glasses, and like a sort of green and white gingham dress, because it's, as we all know, very hot at the moment in the UK, which is not that usual. I'm joined today by a number of Aucademy educator learners because we want to discuss this topic together, and we have a guest, Anna Taylor. So I'm going to ask Annette first if you wouldn't mind doing a physical description, and then we'll go round the group.
Hello, I'm Dr. Annette Foster, and I'm told my internet is not that great, so I might lag a little bit, but I am a white person who's quite red because I'm so hot, with blonde, long hair, blue eyes, and I have a red tank toppy shirt on.
Fantastic.
Wait,
and we are joined by Victoria, if you wouldn't mind doing a physical description.
Yeah, I am Victoria. I'm a white, middle-aged person with shoulder-length grey hair, wearing glasses and wearing a white striped grey and pale blue shirt, wearing headphones and sat on a pale pink sofa.
Thank you very much. And Ben?
Ben is potato filter with headset and purple brick background. That was a mouthful.
Thank you. And it is likely that Victoria will be voicing Ben's chat for them today. And our guest, Anna Taylor, if you wouldn't mind doing a physical description.
Hi, I'm Anna Taylor, a white person with shoulder-length grey straight hair. I have a nice sort of light brown silk shirt on, which feels gorgeous on my skin in this hot weather. And my background is a tree which keeps brushing me on my head. A nice sunset picture that I bought from Joe James, the autistic photographer, and a banner advertising Autism Matters, the charity that I run.
Fantastic stuff. And that is actually going to probably come up in our first key question, which is, who are you? So we know you're Anna Taylor, but who are you and what is or are your dedicated interests?
Okay, so I am first and foremost Anna Taylor, and I am a mum of 4 children, 2 who are autistic. And were diagnosed both when they were 2 years old, and are now 30 and 32, and another girl and another boy who don't have a diagnosis. I run a charity which I have really proudly run for the last 10 years. So we just celebrated being 10 years old. And I was diagnosed autistic last year. So I ran the charity always feeling and kind of self-identifying as autistic. And I run the charity which supports autistic adults.
Fantastic. And Annette, do you want to ask our second question?
Oh, okay. And I assume that's probably your dedicated interest as well, is your charity.
One of.
Yeah, one of. Yeah.
Yeah, one of many. Yeah, my interests, as well as having the autistic diagnosis, I am also ADHD. So I have lots and lots of interests and kind of flip from one thing to the other. But I also have long-standing interests like fossils. I really love fossils and space. So I'm interested in in those kind of things. I have a nice fossil collection on my desk all the time, and wherever I go in the world, I always try and gather more fossils. Quite recently, fridge magnets are my thing as well. So I've been collecting those for a little while now. I do really enjoy music, a variety of types of music, and that is my go-to kind of safe thing. Every time I feel stressed or feel worried or anxious or happy or upset, music is always kind of like the background to my life. And strangely enough, when I'm talking to people, just words trigger songs regularly in my head. So I tend to kind of drift off sometimes with just in normal conversations, because little songs come into my head and I have to kind of play those out. So apologies if I drift at any time, because it's probably I'm playing a tune in my head.
That's fabulous. Well, you have to tell us what the tune is.
Well, you said tune, so Looney Tunes has come straight into my head.
And Chloe is known for making up songs as well. So yeah, so you already kind of said you just discovered that you were autistic last year, but kind of how did you kind of discover that you were autistic? What was the impetus for that? Or
well, I think this charity has been something that I've been so passionate about, and I think the more I've learned about autism from autistic people, the more and more I relate to their way of being. So I've always felt very different right from day one. As far back as I can remember, I don't think I've ever really fitted in anywhere and felt like I belonged. I always felt like I just felt like a bit of an outcast, really. And like nobody really understood me, and the attempts I made to have friends was always kind of, I was always the odd one out, really. I went to boarding school when I was 9, and that was probably one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. But you know, when my father died during that time, and so I always put my difference down to like childhood trauma. That's what I always thought it was. But you know, as I've got older and kind of dealt with all that trauma, those differences for me were always still there. So last year I thought, do you know, I need to just go find out for sure. And I felt a bit of a fraud going and doing that, because I work with lots and lots of autistic people. And I thought, well, it would be so easy for me to just, you know, answer the right questions and do that kind of thing. And I thought, people are going to think I'm just doing this. I don't know why I thought that, but I was worried about what people would think when I went forward for the diagnosis. And I thought, oh, I'm going to go into, I'm not actually going to tell anybody. I didn't even tell my husband or my children. And I went for the diagnosis, and I paid privately for it, because the NHS, it was like a 4-year waiting list to do it in my area. And I thought, I'm just going to go in and answer it completely, honestly, truthfully. And I honestly thought I was going to be kind of borderline, or, you know, maybe under the threshold. And I was very autistic, which I was, you know, I got lots and lots of points. And I was actually quite astounded that someone picked up on that, because I was just being so honest. And I hate the word masking. I don't know why, I just hate that word. But I know that most of my life I've tried hard to fit in and be like other people. And I think that's probably where those points were picked up the most, because that's what I do continually. I look at somebody who's successful or somebody who is interesting to me, and I can do their accents, I can do their mannerisms, and I've learned how to do those kind of things. I think being authentic now, this has been the hardest year of my life, because I've had to become me and take off the accents, the characteristics of people that I've learnt to be, and that's been really, really difficult, because I keep slipping into those kind of things because I've done that for so long. And I think, you know, this last year has been really challenging. I think in the charity, being authentic is fantastic. However, in the 9 years previous to my diagnosis, I was running the charity as CEO, as this character. and now I am authentically me. I feel like I've taken a bit of a backseat to just deal with that, and I've not really moved the charity forward or been set on my vision or anything like that. You know, I think I've really kind of stood back a little bit just to digest that information and understand and try and understand how I feel about things and how I'm coping with things. So it has been a very strange year for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, autistic discovery is not always, it's a rough ride, and I think you kind of become a baby again. You can become a baby autistic, and you have to learn how to be yourself again and learn who you are. And I think, you know, what you were explaining, you know, imposter syndrome is very common among people who are just discovering they're autistic. That's kind of the first thing that we say is one of the common reactions as autistic people. So you're not alone in that, especially. So, yeah.
I also think, I was just going to add to that, Annette. So I also think we see that quite often as well. So not only are you working out your autistic self with that new lens, but also, which we might talk about because we're talking about autistic social groups today. But we've noted when you run those groups, you then don't get to use those groups.
That's
right. So you don't get to use those spaces as an autistic member who wants to go and learn about themselves and things, because you're in a position of facilitation and, you know, making sure it runs well and it's run safely and these kinds of things. So we might talk about that, that actually that can be something that if you're that autistic person or number of people, you know, running those spaces, that can also have a toll on you because you don't get to use those spaces. So that might be something we talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
I was just going to say as well, just we like to say shielding a lot of times now. Katie Monday kind of came up with that term instead of masking. And we quite like that term in relation to masking. I think shielding is when you kind of discover all the important things about yourself as an autistic person so that you can then be able to communicate your needs to other people and, you know, use that as be able to see your mask as a shield instead of something that is more controlling, because a lot of it isn't unconscious, your experience. And, you know, that's something that autistic social group are great for. If, you know, you feel as though you have to shield all day long, every day, if you can go to an autistic social group once a week for a couple of hours and kind of be your authentic self, that can give you that recharge and that energy to go back into the world again. Just knowing that there's other people experiencing what you're experiencing.
Absolutely. So and, you know, this is a really safe place to be who I am. And, you know, I am embracing that now, and talking to staff, talking to members about who I actually am now. And that, you know, this, if I can't be autistic here, I can't be autistic anywhere, you know. So this is a very safe place for me to be me. But I have to acknowledge that, and I have to embrace that, because I haven't done that for such a long time that it's my own inability to kind of take away the shield, you know. That's a challenge that I'm having really at the moment, because I still think people need to see Anna Taylor, the CEO, not Anna Taylor, the autistic, you know, unmasking, unshielding person. And that's my own hang-ups, really.
I think you have, there seems to be this pressure that you have to unshield, unmask, and I don't think that's not necessarily, it has to be done in a way that you feel safe, because it is there for a reason. Absolutely. And I just think, I don't actually know what my authentic self is, because there's so many different layers, and it's just, I think it's an ongoing process in some respects.
And I think that's important to acknowledge, that we do and will be learning about our autistic selves until we die. And I think it's a very long ongoing thing that we'll learn and keep learning about ourselves. I think what's also quite interesting, because we are and will be talking about autistic social groups and autistic social spaces, is the kind of irony that the autistic people in those spaces will respect authenticity. So they're actually going to be willing and accepting of us being ourselves. But that can be a very difficult thing to do, because it's not about demasking, as we've talked about on sessions with Kieran Rose about masking. It's about learning who you are. What are your needs as an autistic person? What is your profile? What makes you the type of pastry that you are, as I'm always joking? What's the ingredients that makes you you? Then you are able to take control of your mask. So that's something different. We've gone on a different track, because I'm going to start us off. No, this is what happens, and it's amazing. Yeah. This is how it goes, and we don't apologize for that at all.
So I know that one of the things you were asking me was about, the social groups for autistic adults, and the charity that I run, Autism Matters, started 10 years ago. So it's 10 years old now. And I started after being made redundant from another charity, and I set up something that I wanted to be sustainable. So that was my goal, something that was sustainable and actually met needs of autistic adults. My 2 sons at the time had just kind of moved into adulthood, and there was just nothing for them. So it was out of a need for my own children as well. And also a financial need for me, because I'd been made redundant and I didn't have a job, and I was claiming benefits, and this course came up about running my own business. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to have a go, and I'm going to try and create something that really is needed. And instead of it being the charity model that I was in before, where you're constantly relying on grants and funding, and then having to change what you deliver because the funding criteria changes, I thought, I'm going to create a sustainable charity that feeds all the money back into creating things that people actually want. And I had all these connections with autistic adults, because I gravitate towards people who think differently. That's because I was always like that. So, and obviously being in the circles with my own children, I was in a lot of parent circles at that time. And then, I think that talking to other autistic adults, and when I talk to people about setting up social groups, it was like you said, Chloe, that, well, why would you want social groups of people who struggle with social interaction? And I was like, well, who else is the best person to socialize with than other people who get you and understand you? And so that was my thought process behind it 10 years ago, when there were literally no social groups for adults at all. There were day centres for disabled adults, the whole population of disabled adults. And I never felt my sons fitted into that type of provision. So I wanted to create something that met their exclusive needs. And their needs were just like everybody else, to be honest, to feel valued, to be part of a group, to pursue the interests that they really like to do. And so I developed this idea around starting social groups. And I did that with a couple of pals who'd also been made redundant. And they were really into the idea. And we recruited 3 people for our first social group. And we decided we'd run a social group twice a week. And that was like, whoa, twice a week, that's a lot. And a lot of organisation and a lot of skills we had to learn. And our first session was ice skating, because that's what people had requested. Well, actually, I want to go ice skating. I've never been ice skating before. And we did that. And then our second session was bowling. Our third session was a disco, and I had a disco with 5 people, and it was fantastic. That was absolutely brilliant. And then they told their friends then wanted to come along. We spoke to social workers, told them about what we were doing, and we funded these through social care budgets. So people who had had an assessment of their needs and were looking for social outcomes and activities were given budgets to come along. And so we charged for the social groups, because I knew that way we could make it sustainable. And so now we have over 100 autistic adults who come on a weekly basis to our social groups. And we run 5 nights of the week, Monday to Friday. On Monday to Wednesday, we have 2 sessions on that night in different places in the area. And we do a double session every Sunday. And we hire a minibus and we go out and about to where they choose they want to go. But every single session that's designed is designed by autistic adults. It's not about what we can plan. Well, I feel like I'm a bit of a facilitator. They tell me what they want and I go and organize everything. And we take any idea that comes along, because if someone's got an idea to do something, then someone else is probably going to be interested in that too. So it's very diverse, the kind of things we do. We do really noisy physical activities, and we do really quiet, introverted, quite solitary activities sometimes to meet different needs of different people, because there are just literally no 2 people who are alike who come to our groups. And we definitely start off when people come along. It's very much driven by the activity. So people come along because they're really, really interested in a particular activity that they want to do. And then what happens is once they come along and they get into that space, they feel safe, they feel like they're meeting like-minded people. They then start booking activities because of who else is there. And that's quite unusual for a lot of the people who come along, that they've never kind of felt connected to people. And for the first time, they are feeling connected to people. So it's wonderful to provide that. And me as an autistic adult too, I've found my tribe. I've found people who have very similar interests to me. And so I feel really connected to people too. It's not a hierarchy in any way, shape or form. It's not Anna there as CEO and then facilitators. It's very much a co-produced group, so that everybody who comes along is included if they want to be in making choices about what's on in the next month. And the way
how did you find, because you say it's very sort of activity orientated, which is fantastic, but how did you manage to sort of translate this online during lockdown?
That was really tough, and we literally were told we were going into lockdown very quickly, weren't we, when it happened? And I was kind of in denial, like, oh, this is never going to happen, this is ridiculous, doing all of this. I was probably really happy to take those kind of risks, because I knew that what we were providing was fantastic. But when we had to go into lockdown, we had to, and there was no providing social activities in groups together physically. So we had to pivot really, really quickly and go online. And every single night of the week, we did different activities. So we did the usual Zoom quiz type things, but we also did physical exercise online. So we had our very own version of Joe Wicks, and we did chair exercises and real proper physical exercises, everyone bouncing around in their rooms. We did cooking together online. So someone would post a recipe, can we try this? And then we'd all go get the ingredients delivered from, deliveries rather than going out to the shops, because it was so difficult to get out. And we'd cook along together on Zoom, which was amazing. We actually tried discos online, which weren't really successful, because a lot of people who access the groups are very musical and are interested in different types of music, and really, you know, that's their kind of favorite stims. And so we tried that, but the sound quality was never that good on Zoom. So they weren't as successful, and we tried and failed with lots of things, but we tried, and that was the key point, that we tried to provide different things. And if someone suggested something, we'd give it a go. One of the most memorable ones I remember, which was wonderful, was someone had suggested, let's all send in baby pictures of ourselves to Anna, and she can put them up and everyone can guess to see who it is, which baby picture belongs to which member. And everybody loved that. They all sent me all the baby pictures, and I was like, I can't believe this is them. It was a really lovely session, that one, and we spent ages doing that. We did a room 101 thing as well. And, you know, it was literally anybody was open to give us ideas about what they'd like to do. And again, we did exactly the same thing. We gave out the information on a weekly basis so that everyone knew what the sessions were going to be the next week. So they had decided whether they wanted to come online or not. And we had breakout rooms for like the quiet areas, you know, so for people who didn't really want to be involved in the activity but wanted to just chat together, we'd open up big breakout rooms for people, and they told us that previously, so we knew who was going into which room and what they might be doing in there, with a facilitator as well. So yeah, it was actually easier than I thought. Once it got going, we know there was lots of suggestions and ideas of what we could do.
Well, I'd quite like to ask everybody a fun question. We're talking about autistic social groups, but isn't that an oxymoron? Because autistic people aren't social, are they? So Anna already kind of mentioned that as well, but can we talk to this idea that we're not sociable people, and talk to the fact that, yes, we are, but in different ways? Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Annette?
I would say that autistic people just communicate differently, and therefore we socialize differently. And that really relates to our experience of the world and our sensory experience of the world. And that kind of means that we communicate differently, we socialize differently, and it's not any better than or worse from neurotypicals. It's just different. And that's one of the things, I mean, me and Chloe started running an autistic, it was a support group when we joined it. And then we decided it was for women only. And then we decided actually that it should be opened up. It was women and non-binary people, I think at the time, trans people possibly. But we thought it should be opened up because actually it was more about people who were kind of more shielded or more internal autistic people. And ultimately, the most important thing was that when you come to the autistic space and autistic social group, that it's different. So, you know, there's no expectation that you need to sit all in a circle and stare at each other. There's no expectation of eye contact. There's no expectation that you even need to join in the conversation if you don't want to, you know, just being there and listening. We always encourage people, you know, if they wanted to bring drawing or a video game or a puzzle or origami or whatever it was that they wanted to bring, you know, they could do that and listen to people. And that, you know, that is participation. That participation is just being there as an autistic person. And we really valued that. We always brought a STEM suitcase to our groups, and you know, they're much more kind of just a room with a bunch of autistic people in them. And it sounds like you've done some amazing things, Anna, with your groups as well. Cooking, I can't imagine. I'm so dyspraxic, but I do cook. So yeah, online, that's amazing. I think I did that once with Chloe and Jessica, and I dropped chocolate all over my laptop and almost... I was trying
Cooking sessions were fabulous, though. They were really good. And, you know, only people who wanted to participate and do that did, and others were in the breakout room, and then they'd come back and have a little nosy at what we were doing and see if it tasted nice. And we actually, you know, tried the food as well and came back and said, yeah, that was nice, or no, that was blooming awful, you know. But we made also, and it did tend to be a lot of sweet things, because I think people were feeling really down and needed a bit of chocolate, and we made lots and lots of sweet things. But we also did the traditional things from Teesside, which was the parmos. Everyone got to make parmos, which I don't know if any of you have tried parmos before, traditional Teesside dish. Ah, right. Well, you might have to try them. They're fantastic. It's breaded chicken with bechamel sauce and then cheese on the top. Delicious.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think I'm just going to read Callum Brazzo's comment as well, which is important and interesting as well, because I think we do see this sometimes, which is, so Callum says, communication is a spectrum, but often people come into my group. So I know that Callum runs some groups as well. Can you remind us where actually yours are, Callum, if you're in the chat box there? But they often come into my group. Oh, is it Lincolnshire? Thank you, Victoria. Oh no, I'll start again. Hold on, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry. Communication is no, not your fault. Communication is a spectrum, but often people come into my group with the expectations of neurotypical ran society, and there is a lot of unlearning to do, and that in itself is a massive process. And certainly, yeah, we've been looked at in odd ways, haven't we, Annette? When we've got our little groups, when it was a lot more in person, because we are odd. We do our Ministry of Funny Walks, and just do really random things. But when you're together in that group, you've got that sort of a bit more confidence and a bit of camaraderie that doesn't, you feel like this is okay to be weird. I don't mind necessarily that there's some neurotypicals who've just walked past our group thinking, oh, they're a bit odd, aren't they? Which is kind of fun. But yeah, there is a bit of unlearning that can take place in those places.
If you've just discovered that you're autistic and don't know very many autistic people, it could, yeah, you expect a social group to be just exactly the same as a neurotypical social group, but with autistic people, and that's not actually how it is. You know, it's a very different social space, and it's much more accepting of difference. It's much more open to different ways of communication. You know, online, using the chat, and then, you know, voicing that chat so that it's part of the conversation is really a big part of our online social groups. We try to make that really important and actually have some of the facilitators, like amazing Ben, who don't speak, but, you know, use the chat, and then other people speak that chat for them verbatim as part of the conversation, so that it's not an afterthought. It's actually just as important as any other comments, which is incredibly important to acknowledge that. And also, you know, just, you know, like we bring a STEM toys to every session, and we really encourage, you know, group stimming, because it's such an amazing thing to do as autistic people. But sometimes people look at us and like, you're playing with toys, and we're like, no, these are concentration tools. These are regulation tools. And, you know, it's interesting. And yeah, I think I'm worried that Victoria had their hand up, so I don't want to.
No, I think,
yeah.
I think you've actually, I can't even remember what the original thought was, to be honest, but it is, I think for me, it reduced originally, when I went into it, it does look very different. There is a lot, it's getting used to that. There are moments of silence, and also that it's getting used to people have sort of processing times and things like that. And eventually it just feels a lot more natural, but in a very different way. And I think I've only realized how different it is when I've ended up in sort of neurotypical social spaces, and it's been like shock horror having to sort of go back to it, and having to remember what I was supposed to do, and it was awful. Ben says the perk of including technology as part of the social groups, for example, online social groups where there is a chat box or live captions, etc., making it more accessible to communicate.
And I want to speak a little bit to that. Sorry, Anne, if you're all right to hold, will you remember your thought before I forget mine? Okay, hold on. This is fun, isn't it? When we're all like, I'm going to forget my thought. Because I'm thinking about even when we were in-person spaces. So one of the first places I actually met Ben was in our social group, or did you come to the SYA program first? The program first.
SYA, yeah.
Okay, so Ben came through our what was then called the So You're Autistic program. We're now calling it the Autistic Discovery Journey, and was quiet because they experienced situational mutism. And then I remember you being in our in-person social group spaces, and although you were still, I think, anxious to be around us as a group of people, I do remember attempting, I don't know if you remember, to talk to you in that space, but via our phones. So you would be sitting on another sofa and I would message you back and forth, not loads, but on a phone, for instance, and things like that, because I knew Ben a little bit at that point to know he has things to say. And how are we going to have that conversation in a way that would actually be good for Ben? I don't know if you've got any thoughts around that, Ben, actually. Do you remember me doing that? I don't know whether that made you uncomfortable, because I was trying my best to think, how do I include this person? But I've never actually asked you, did that make you feel uncomfortable? Did that make you feel embarrassed that I was still talking to you, in literally sitting next to you almost, but via the phone? Ben's having a think and having a type. And I also want to ask Victoria, because I wasn't there, the session where, one of the first sessions where Ben actually facilitated our online social group purely via the chat, and everyone said it went really well. Were you there? Could you talk to that? Do you remember what it was like?
I don't think I was at that actual one, but it is just accepted. That's what I love about the space. I don't even think that Ben isn't using mouth words now. It is just accepted that this is Ben. The voice is just it, because you can communicate in so many different ways, even by the choice of the filter and things, like the personality of Ben comes across. And that's what I love about autistic spaces. And what I love about them is it's accepted that a person can often sit off camera for months and months and months, and that doesn't matter. And when they do come out, they come out when they're ready, and it's just, it means a lot. Ben says, I appreciated it. Having the option is key. Feels unnatural now to go into NT social space where they don't even consider anything other than mouth words. And that's, what I find really hard now is when there are things online and you're dealing with services or people and nobody bothers to look in the chat box. And we've had that when other members of Aucademy, we've gone into spaces where they're asking for our input or opinion, and no one actually thinks that a person, they automatically assume that a person can use mouth words and don't bother to even look in the chat. And that's just losing your voice.
I suggest, actually, that we all need these lovely people out there. So I will describe these for people in case you can't see them. So they are cards that say things like, please read chat. That's a really key one, particularly when we're in those neurotypical spaces. You're on mute. Please use plain language. And please, can I speak? So if you don't feel comfortable, confident to get your voice out if you do use mouth words, or actually you want people to read the chat box. And I don't know if you can get these, but they were designed by Sussex EDS service by Jane Green. So you might be able to get them or just make your own, but they're very useful. And Anna, any thoughts on any of that? Because we talked about a few things there, but the initial question...
That's kind of like common practice every single session that we're in. You know, there are such a variety of people who come along who are all autistic and all different to each other, communicate in different ways, want to be on their own. You know, I was in the group last night because, you know, as being CEO, I want to know every single person who comes into our sessions, and so that I'm making sure people's needs are actually really being met. And so last night I was in, we had a really large group in the headquarters last night, and it was games night, so people could bring their own games. We have a lot of games there already, and those kind of games are either sort of online gaming. There's a gaming area where people can do online gaming with each other if they want to, or individually. And also we have kind of like board games as well, which are individual or with other people if they choose to do something on their own, like jigsaws. You know, there was probably a table of 4 people doing 4 different jigsaws, but working on them individually together. And then we have sort of a games area where we've got a pool table and people can do that on their own, or they can do it with somebody else. Sometimes competitions get going, and other times people just want to play on their own, and that's fine. We had a card game going on in one of the rooms. We had Warhammer going on, and there was someone who brought their Warhammer stuff, and there was 4 people in there doing that. And then in other areas, there's like soft sofas with blankets, so people were under the blankets. And you know, other people were doing art in another area. So the games night is kind of inclusive of all types of different activities. And sometimes it was noisy, sometimes it was really quiet. We got fish and chips in for those who wanted fish and chips, and someone went out to get Burger King for people who wanted Burger King. So we involve food as well. And some people don't want to eat when they're there, and that's fine too. And it's such a big facility that we have here. And I think we had 19, 20 people who had come, and we had 6 staff to facilitate that. And when I recruit staff who, first and foremost, are either neurodivergent. That's kind of like a positive discrimination I do around recruitment. And we look at people who are diverse. So we have a lot of diversity within our staff team, so that because people relate to different people in different ways, and we want to be able to provide people as facilitators who certain people might gravitate towards because of their differences, or because they're gay, or because it's an older guy, or because it's a younger girl. You know, there are certain things that people gravitate towards more than others. And so I want to be able to, when we're looking at facilitation, have a variety of people who are working for us, who can meet the needs of lots of different members who come through the door. And it's not traditionally in social care type situations where social workers are given budgets for people. It's very much female-led organisations and female-led support, and that's not the case as much here. And we don't quite have. We probably have a third people who identify as females, and then we're looking at increasing that as much as we can. And I think when people look at us online, we're very visible online. They see people like themselves, and that's important, that they've got someone when they come in that they can relate to somebody and feel included. Because I think in sort of non-autistic, neurotypical spaces, that it doesn't seem to happen as much. But as well as providing these safe places in our own building, it's been right from the start. We've been out in the community, along with the neurotypical people, going to neurotypical places, but educating people. So we may have 15, 20 people turn up at a restaurant, which we've pre-booked and usually pre-ordered the food. So people have checked the menus, know exactly what they want. We've pre-ordered what we're going to have before we get there. In the same space as a lot of neurotypical people. And we've had a lot of discrimination, which we've challenged every single time. And now in our area, people know us, they know the group, and people are being, are making the adjustments and are welcoming, whereas 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. 10 years ago, it felt really like we were challenging the norm. But now, having neurodivergent people, autistic people out in the community, just like, you know, neurotypicals, that's okay. And lots of people want to do that. And lots of organizations are more inclusive. And, you know, when we go in sometimes to a restaurant, the music's too loud, we ask for the music to be turned down. There's no issues with that at all. You know, I say, oh, yeah, of course, no problem. Yeah, we understand. And then I usually get waiters or owners or whatever coming up and saying, oh, my son's just been diagnosed autistic. You know, what do you suggest? And there are more and more people who are understanding the needs, that needs may be different for people who are autistic. And that's because we're out and about and doing that. It's, you know, it's not just about having a space here where people are autistic altogether. We also, and that, I must say, that works really well. It works really, really well. But also when we're out and about, we're also providing that kind of education for people who are running businesses to be inclusive, more inclusive for autistic adults when they're coming into it. And so what's happening is the adults who have felt safe coming out and about with us and, you know, are actually going out and doing those things on their own now that they've never done before. So that's really, you know, really progressive and forward thinking, I think.
Yeah, Ben asks, how are autistic spaces different to non-autistic autism spaces?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're just really more aware, aren't we, of what our sensory needs particularly might be, of what our particular stims are sometimes, you know. And I think if you have that awareness and understanding that everyone is different and might experience the world differently and experience the situation differently, that's when you're meeting autistic needs. Non-autistic.
So do you have,
mm-hmm.
Sorry, do you have, like, within your groups and things like that, do you explore sort of autistic identity through like stims, looking at different stim, or sort of exploring the profile, different profiles of being
absolutely.
autistic,
I mean,
opposed to
quite often when people are referred to us, or they self-refer, mainly when they're referred by social workers, they come with a support plan, and we read those support plans, but very often those support plans are written in a way that are about social care outcomes, you know, like little ticky box type things, and very very restrictive. So someone recently was referred to us, this person needs 2-to-1 support. I hate that, because people come to us and they choose to be with us, they choose the activities that they want to do, and they're not challenging in the way that social workers describe them being challenging, you know, challenging behavior. What we see is that when people choose to do what they want to do and they're comfortable coming somewhere that they want to come to, that those challenging behaviors that are written about them are never present, because they are getting the adjustment that they need. So it could be that they just need a bit of a quieter space, that they're actually taking part in an activity that they choose to do, not they have to go there on a Monday night. So if that's ever written into a support plan from a social worker, I say, no, that's not how we do things here. you know, the local authorities work with us, and most social workers are really, really good and get what we are doing. But, you know, the odd one will try to be very prescriptive about what this person needs, without actually asking someone what they need, whether that be verbally or finding out when they are non-verbal, you know, they're not using their voice to talk, that they don't really look at other alternative ways of getting that information. And so when people are referred to us and they come along, we don't ignore the support plans. We read them, we understand them, but we look ourselves and we talk to people and we see what their interests are. And quite often what's written about them is very different to the people that actually come through our door, choose to be there and engage with us. And then, you know, when the social workers go back and do the reviews, it's like, oh, wow, this is amazing. How is this happening? Well, actually, someone just listened to them. Somebody provided something that they actually wanted, and telling them, instead of telling them this is what you need. And
I always find that interesting.
So
how
basic, isn't it?
Yeah, I always find that interesting and really distressing at times, actually, how people might be described. So sometimes if families bring their young people to consult with me, they are so used to having to explain their amazing young person to non-autistic neurotypical people, and they describe this child the way that they are having to explain the needs to a neurotypical person. And then I meet that young person and I'm sort of preparing myself that they're going to be particularly challenging for me, not them, but challenging for me to communicate with. And then I meet them and I'm like, I'm just an autistic person. Like, and that's
just
not the family's fault at all. Yeah. And that's not the family's fault at all. It's just that that's how they've had to learn to talk to non-autistic people.
Absolutely.
To get the services, to understand the needs of that young person. But then and it's just that's not the people who end up meeting. You end up meeting just and I say just an autistic person. And then finding out about them. I wonder what others as well think about the differences, if you've ever been in any autism spaces versus autistic spaces. I've got a feeling I'm kind of lucky. I don't feel that I've necessarily been in autism spaces per se.
What about that? There's been a few chill out rooms that have not been really autistic friendly necessarily that you've been in. The autism show, which is basically just a trade show, really, is not autistic friendly at all. Like, it is a nightmare. Sensorily, I mean, a lot of the stuff there is not, I don't think is very helpful for autistic people. And they have autistic speakers. Maybe they pay them now, but they didn't used to pay them. When I went, I did it for free. So, you know, they do have autistic speakers, but we're probably the only people in the building that aren't being paid. So I'm just trying to think, you know, just everything that's not autistic is the autism show, I have to say, that travels around.
I think, and that's the frustrating thing as well, as I spoke to somebody who was recognised as autistic last year and trying to work that out and feeling quite lost. And one of the only things so far that they kind of went to was the autism show very recently, and it made them feel even more lost. It's not for autistic people. And so I think for anyone, you know, whether it's your young person or you yourself, and you want to find autistic spaces, it is to try and find the autistic led ones, which I know can feel a little bit difficult, but I think they do exist. So obviously,
I feel as though we need a list, because there's so many people consult wise. Yeah, a directory of like, where are the autistic social groups and the in-person ones and online, because so many people are just, you know, that's the most important thing, to have community, to be around other autistic people, to know other autistic people, and not feel like you're, isolated and alone, and that you're the only person that's, you know, experiencing this. It's so important to have community. And I just feel like, we need to have a directory of all the different places that people can go in different parts of the country.
So we're just saying, like, we've got Callum Bratso, who's got somewhere in got groups in Lincolnshire. Anna, where are your groups?
Teesside, so the northeast of England. Yeah, and what I want to do, and this is kind of my vision, is that I want to package up what we do and have it like a do-it-yourself toolkit, and create something that people could just pick up and then create something similar, you know, with all those, like Ben's just said there, the tips, like what are the tips to do this? I want to try and create a do-it-yourself toolkit so that anyone with an interest in that could just easily, you know, create something that is a really good inclusive space for autistic adults.
We've kind of done that ourselves as well, but not necessarily publicized it at this point, because so we can talk to that. So let me think. So I was just going to list some groups that we know of at least. So we've got one in Teesside at least, or number. We've got Lincolnshire with Callum Bratso. Our groups are online. So actually, Ben, would you mind flagging the banner that talks about our different groups? So if you're not in our groups already, we have online groups. One of them meets on Zoom and the others are Facebook spaces. So we've got an arts group, animals group, the social group is on Zoom, a memes group, LGBTQIA plus group, a caregivers group, and there's an info dump vaults group on Discord, which is relatively quiet. There's Autism Inclusivity Meets in London, and a number of other places. So I think the really important thing is to look for autistic-led ones, because there will be local and, for instance, NAS, so National Autism Society in our UK country, depends where you are in the world, you know, that aren't always that great, and they're not necessarily autistic-run spaces, and so they're not necessarily going to be that safe. And so what I want to talk to is that, yes, when with our groups, for instance, Victoria and Annette put together some key document with tips and tools and scripts for some of our autistic facilitators, because our Aucademy members, some of them want to facilitate our groups and help us because we need that help. But they were nervous about things like starting the conversation at the start. So Victoria and Annette, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah,
I
think.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's volunteers as part of our social groups, so that's a bit different. I'm very jealous of Anna's. They actually have a space, which is something Chloe has always wanted to have, an autistic space. But yeah, I think, you know, these are volunteers as well, so giving them an opportunity to, you know, facilitate the social group is important as well. But go ahead, Victoria.
I think it's giving sort of the accommodations and adjustments that we need, because I myself can't start a conversation. It's not that I don't want to connect, but it's just my brain just goes, that's it. I know that once that there is something to start, then it flows a bit. And also having that script there doesn't necessarily mean you will follow this script. It is just that is a backup, because we all know that, well, my brain goes blank at any moment, and it's just having that fallback there for those moments, and I think that's quite important. And what I like about the space is that anyone can access it, because a lot of issues with a lot of these spaces and charitable led organizations, even though they are autistic led, is to try and access that funding through social care is an absolute nightmare in itself, and the whole system of that is inaccessible for many people. So I think it's important sometimes that these spaces don't have to be necessarily sort of funded, and I think that is the beauty of the internet, and that has brought a certain amount of freedom for people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm trying to think of things that we haven't spoke about. So we spoke about the chat. We kind of create, I guess, ways of talking online, because done a lot of things online in the last couple of years. And one of the things that a lot of autistic people say they don't like is small talk. Small talk can be a bit just annoying. And most autistic people want to speak big talk, about things that they enjoy. So one of the first things that we like to do in the session, just to get things going and also facilitate turn taking, because a lot of times people don't know when it's their turn, or, is to just ask really simple questions. But one of the things we hate is that being asked, how are you? Or how was your week? Because, for one thing, I don't know half the time. I mean, a lot of autistic people are alexithymic, including myself. And to ask me how I am, I don't always know. Or someone could say, well, a lot of things happened to me last week. What am I supposed to tell you? Because, I could tell you my entire week if that's, possible. So we started just doing something simple, which was talking about, I started it by saying highs and lows of the week. And then I think at the time, lovely Jessica had one of these octopuses. So talked about, oh, here he is. I can't even get him on screen. Oh, it's because it's there. Happy and sad octopus. So we talked about what is your happy octopus and what is your sad octopus for the week. And then we kind of obviously veered to nah octopus or weird octopus, or, just finding ways for people to kind of share something about the week with each other, but also having turn taking. So being able that everyone has a go if they want to, whether it's in the chat or it's verbally, to kind of talk. One of the big things that we always say is people always have an opportunity to pass doing anything. And that's incredibly important. Yeah.
Fantastic. I just wanted to, so I'm going to flag what's on the screen, and then I'm going to ask a question from Callum that I think Victoria will also be able to, and Ben be able to answer, because they do facilitate our groups, for instance. And I imagine Anna's got some similar things around safeguarding and things. So, and of your facilitators. I just want to flag that, Bobby's mentioned about Autistic Inclusive Meets community group in London. There's also the London Autism Group charity that Annette and I are connected to in some capacity. And Chris is in the comment section, who is talking about, they run groups that do, they run a monthly community cafe drop-in, which is a fully inclusive space with no registration, and it's autistics and neurodivergent people can come together and share drinks and connect and things. And that's a very, also, again, autistic-led charity that does that work. So the bit that I want to flag here is Callum saying, what tips do people have for ensuring autistic or otherwise neurodivergent members are empowered to help run the groups, especially with risk-averse charities, to give all involved the security of running things? So I'm just thinking if Ben and Victoria, for instance, can you talk to how we try to maintain safety for both our autistic facilitators and our members in our group?
I think we have sort of developed, well, there are sort of, it's not rules as such, it's sort of, these are things that we have to keep to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. So there's things like being aware of trigger warnings or content warnings, because a lot of things that may not trigger, may seem harmless, may actually trigger a lot of people there. So it's ensuring that people, now we've got the structure that people know who the facilitators are, so that they can message at any point to say that they don't feel comfortable with something, and or something that is potentially triggering, giving people space to either move out into one of the breakout rooms. So there are different breakout rooms. So there's a quiet room, or there is a room for somebody that has been triggered. So if they go into that, then they can receive support. And it's also being aware that quite often, I think, as autistic people, we have been invalidated when we have spoken about things. So often feel silenced, and not wanting to sort of make people feel uncomfortable or apologizing if they have mentioned something, to say, well, if you want to carry on discussing that, and go into a breakout room as well.
And I think we also try, don't we, to have at least 2 facilitators.
Yes.
So for a number of reasons, that's for everybody's safety and safeguarding. You've always got 2 people there. At the moment, we're struggling a little bit with our Fridays. So our Fridays, if we haven't got enough volunteers, then we won't sadly host our Friday socials on Zoom, because if we've only got 1 facilitator, we won't run it. So because of a number of things, it's also your spoons, your energy. It takes time, doesn't it, and energy to run that group, because you're thinking about things, because you're not there as a member, you're there as a facilitator. So we have that kind of safeguarding going on as well for everybody. So I think if there's any other safeguarding.
I was just thinking, even the structure, creating a structure and let everyone know that there is a structure, creates a little bit of safety as well. And I know that Anna was saying that as well. You give the schedule ahead of time and people know exactly what's going to happen and what they're booking onto, and we kind of have the same structure every week for the sessions. Obviously different things happen, and whoever's facilitating it makes that change, but that's important. And having those kind of things in the script for people if something kind of goes wrong. I'm trying to think. I know there's a few things where we're like, how do we redirect something that's, or how do we kind of get, off topic that maybe isn't the greatest topic to be on, or things like that.
And even just explaining, sorry, Victoria, go on.
I think it is having sometimes those key phrases so that it doesn't make it sort of awkward, or it's also for the facilitator, but the actual person that's part of the group as well, because I think so many of us have just experienced so much invalidation going into social spaces, and you're constantly apologizing, whereas there's no need to apologize in an autistic space.
And also making sure that those facilitators know that if they hear something and they're worried about what they heard, that they're passing it along to somebody else. So one of our new facilitators was very much to the letter about that. They messaged me afterwards and they said, even though somebody else, one of the other facilitators, checked and sent them on the person who they were worried about, gave them information and things, you did say we should pass on if we hear anything that we're a bit, that's potentially worrying or whatever, which was really lovely. And they didn't need to, but they were trying to do it by the letter as well, because they've been given that guidance, which is great, because they wanted to make sure that it was safe. Anna, any thoughts on this?
I think it's also important to say we're not a therapy space as well, and I think it's important that to make that boundary, and don't always have to have all the answers or anything.
Yeah, and I know you guys are all talking about online spaces. So as far as we're concerned, in our physical spaces, everybody who is employed by the charity is obviously enhanced DBS. So you've got all of those safeguarding things done. They've got insurance. They use their own cars to pick people up. They've got business insurance on their cars. They bring people to the space. So people are getting there and getting home safely, because they're in the evening, and there's not always buses or trains, even though we're really sort of centrally located for people to get to. We want to make sure people are safe getting there and safe getting home too. And we have safeguarding training that all of the staff do. We recruit autistic staff. So one of our trustees is autistic. Obviously, I'm autistic as CEO. We have autistic personal assistants and support workers. Our admin team, our receptionist is autistic, our cleaner is autistic. So at all levels within our organisation, we've recruited autistic adults. And that, like people who are challenged by me sometimes, the way I am, it can be lots of challenges, and how that information is disseminated and used between people, and we all have different ways of communicating. So some of that can be challenging for neurotypicals who are working here too, but it's good to have that diversity in your team, and people feel really safe. People know the information before they are coming along, so they're choosing things they want to do. And I guess, like you're all saying, things sometimes can change direction when people are there. And the staff are all aware of those. So again, on Friday night, we had one of the members was a bit uncomfortable about a couple who are just starting a relationship, and they were doing public displays of affection. And one of the members was quite uncomfortable about that, because the way they were brought up was very much that doesn't happen, and they don't like seeing people kissing. And these guys are consenting adults, so there is no rules to say that public displays of affection shouldn't happen. But also it's uncomfortable for some people, so it's kind of a two-way approach. It's a very gentle conversation with the people who are displaying that. These two guys met when they were here and have fallen in love, and are at that stage of a relationship where they literally can't keep their hands off each other, but it's really uncomfortable for other people to see. And so, like I say, we're talking to them about that, not that we don't want to see that, and we're really delighted that the relationship has developed and they seem so happy with each other, but also to respect other people who aren't quite at that stage and aren't comfortable with those public displays of affection. So we've asked them to tone it down, but we're also working with a person who really struggles with that to help them understand the relationship journey, and understand about that. So it's not always an easy situation. Things arise, and
that
we talk
is a
about
difficult,
it like adults.
That is a difficult thing to navigate because of the sensitivities. And to be honest, I would be the same. I would have a sensitivity and feel uncomfortable around public space of affection, but not because of those people. It would just that's my thing, if you like. And actually, we have a number of. We've built over time different guidelines. We try not to call them rules, particularly because we do have a lot of people with the persistent drive for autonomy in our groups. And so we try not to make them rules. They're guidelines that we would like people to be able to try and follow, but we can't enforce that necessarily. And that's around things like, could we not have people eating on screen, for instance? And lots of spaces, people probably don't think anything of people eating, but actually in our community there might be people who've experienced eating disorders or still do, or have sensory issues around eating and other people eating, and all sorts of things. So it's about being sensitive to each other's needs and differences, and
it's about the awareness of that, isn't it? Absolutely, about the awareness. So within our group we have food, so we go out for food is delivered to us, and we have a number of people who come who really have issues around sensitivities, certain smells, or hearing people eating, or eating in front of other people. We've got a number of people who won't and just are, hate the idea of anyone seeing them eat. And so, we make those adjustments. So there's areas where people are eating who want to eat together. There's areas where people can eat individually. And there's also the option to take food home with you, so you can eat it when you get home if that's what you want to do. And you don't have to have food when you're there too. So we try to be as, it's about awareness. Awareness is the first thing, isn't it? If you're aware that there are all these differences, you also build in those adjustments.
And if there's no malice behind a person's behaviour, then making attempts to, accommodate those people. So I'm going to give an example of a new person that we had who's really lovely. Victoria, you spoke to them, didn't you? And they're a lovely person. And they were, they're quite late recognised as autistic, and they came to one of our spaces, and our spaces are weird, right? Compared to a non-autistic space, they're very unusual to us. They're not, because we're used to them now, but they are different. And they were very thrown by the fact that a number of our members use filters. So for those who can't see Ben, and as a reminder, Ben is on screen currently as a potato. So he's using a filter as a potato. And so we had a number of people, and that was actually quite unnerving for this person. They'd never sort of seen that before, and it made them feel really uncomfortable. But the saddest thing, I think, was that we've had this with a small number of people, where they've actually clearly tried other spaces, and when they found those spaces difficult, or they've not understood something, I think they've been thrown out or banned. So this person was like, you know, trying to ask about this and being really tentative about putting this across, that they were uncomfortable, and sort of talking about, I understand if you need to ban me. Now that's really heartbreaking. We're not going to ban someone because they're finding something odd and difficult, you know. So Victoria spent, I think it was a quieter session, wasn't it? So some of you had a chat with them, and maybe talked through why people use the filters. You know, they use the filters because actually it makes them feel comfortable, and a bit more confident and a bit safer to be on screen, for instance. So it's about balancing those things and really trying. We don't want to lose those people. Those people don't deserve to be isolated, and that is a very real possibility for so many autistic people. So we do try very hard, I'm sure all of us, and I know other groups, you know, Callum's groups, Chris's groups, and autism inclusivity, to make sure we're trying with those people who aren't trying, they're not trying to be malicious, they're not trying to be difficult, and things. Any thoughts around that a bit, Annette?
Well, I had a thought, but I don't know if I just wanted to say also that, you know, a lot of the information and kind of inspiration for our autistic social groups, in person and online, have come from Autscape, and Autstreat, which was in America, but Autscape is an autistic retreat that happens every year. It's over like 3 days, 4 days, maybe sometimes. And it happens at different places all over the country. And it's kind of a conference, but also autistic social space, and different things happen. I mean, I did creative workshops there. They did something which was amazing, which I've recreated with people, which is night lights, which they played music and they sold all these kind of things that lit up. So different things. I mean, I've got a pen here that lights up, but they had some really cool things. And we all just were in a dark space and, you know, played and danced with a bunch of really cool lights, which was amazing. And yeah, I just wanted to a shout out to that, because that's been a big inspiration. I can't remember how long Autscape is going on. I think Autstreat started in the 90s, and it's not actually happening in the States anymore. But yeah, kind of the history of autistic social spaces, and where we kind of understood that autistic spaces were different, and that were needed, which is really important. And I just wanted to, because we've got this comment from Callum. Shall I read it? I'll read it. But how do you build up facilitators with risk-adverse charities who deem certain members at risk? Qualifications to give credibility, for example, which would be great. Maybe we should, create a quote. I guess I just need to get tougher on autistic inclusivity. So I suppose that means for facilitators. The physical space of my group is part of an NT-led charity, so there is a constant barrier that, because they cannot guarantee breakout rooms, etc., it's an ongoing balance I'm aiming to strike. Thanks for the chat. And one of the things we've talked about a lot, and obviously if we were funded, it would be totally different, but to have supervision, so someone to talk to about what's going on. So in, you know, that regular, just like a counselor has supervision, so they go to somebody who has more experience at what they do than somebody else, and talk about their clients, obviously, you know, and what's going on, and how they're feeling about it. And I think you know, it's quite important for facilitators to be able to talk to other people and each other, you know, whether it's a group or it's just one other person, that they can talk to about issues that arise when they do facilitate. And that might be a suggestion to them, that, you know, that there's somebody that they report to on a regular basis that they can talk about issues with.
Yeah, if I'm okay to butt in there, we regularly supervise the staff who are working for us, and we have the luxury of being able to pay people, and we're not relying on volunteers, because we've been down that road and it just didn't work for us, because people make relationships with people, and they have no reason to come if they don't want to for whatever reason, and it's difficult. So we pay people, we supervise them. They're obviously have training, and we buy in Kieran Rose, his training. So and he's just amazing, he really is, and he's agreed to come and facilitate our staff meetings, so people can discuss any particular issue they might have, something that might have come up in one of the groups and they're struggling with, or wonder whether they've approached it in the right way. And we do that now, which is wonderful. So yeah, I think if you can build in autistic trainers, that's a really big useful thing. And I know Kieran's got online courses as well, so it's worth buying those courses for your staff if you're employing staff too. Yeah. And
we've just flagged on the screen. So Ben's flagged. The URL is theautisticadvocate, all one word, .com. That's for Kieran Rose's page. And also I want to flag for people Autscape. So you've got the URL for Autscape, so AUTSCAPE.org, for people who can't see the screen.
And that's happening in August, I'm pretty sure, soon.
Coming up, yes, it's coming up from what I understand. Yeah. Victoria, you're going, are you not?
Yeah,
Victoria's going.
Yeah. 8th to the 11th of August.
Fantastic. So before we wrap up or wind down, I wanted to, so right at the start, I put in the comment section for people, and I need to remind myself what I actually asked everyone. I asked, hey everyone, what do you need from autistic social spaces? So I just wanted to see what people said in our comment section. So what did we have? We have here Bobby saying autistic, where are we? Sorry. The ability to feel safe and understanding of communication types like bluntness, etc., respect and being listened to. And I think we've echoed some of that as well, Bobby. So you were right at the start with that, that thought. And I think, yeah, that is important, and that listening being in all different ways. So again, if that person uses alternate means of communication, and also we pay attention quite often, particularly when we were a lot more in person, in our in-person spaces, to, we pick up on things with other autistic people. We pick up on the little movements that people might do and think that nobody else can see, or they're not, particularly if they're quite a masked autistic person. And so you can pick up on those things and then start to support that person because you're listening. You're listening, i.e. paying attention to those things that they might be doing, which I've realised can be quite unnerving for other autistic people, because I'm very aware of these things and I will just call it out because I'm like, oh, what are you doing? This is interesting. And those people are not used to people paying attention to those things. So I always wonder, have I just scared that poor autistic person by paying attention to something? Callum, when asked that question, said, what do you need from autistic social spaces? Space to pace. And Callum is a poet and spoken word poet, aren't you as well, Callum? So I just like the, space to pace, just sounds really nice. What we've got here, we've got Bobby again. So it's imperative to find safe spaces. And thank you, Bobby, saying that Aucademy spaces are very safe. So we do try, as I'm sure lots of autistic-led spaces do try. So this was quite early on. So this is Robert. So quite early on, I think I mentioned something along the lines of something we haven't actually talked about in detail. But yes, when you're the autistic facilitator, or you start up and start running groups, it can mean that you don't end up being able or feeling able to use those spaces for yourself. So you're not necessarily able to go there or feel that you can go into those spaces and talk about how you're having a really tough time, and things like that, and using those spaces in the way that other members do. So what Robert says here is personal opinion, but I feel you can get a lot yourself out of a group, especially as the facilitator of the group. Absolutely. I think we do. Our facilitators want to facilitate for a reason. I guess what we're talking about is, so for instance, although it doesn't get used much, we do actually have an Aucademy Modmins group, which is, as it sounds, it's for our facilitators, so that they've got that space that they could talk to other facilitators and say, do you know what, I'm having a really tough time, or whatever it might be, so that they don't feel that they're on their own and they're not getting the same sort of support that they would get from if they went into those spaces. What have I got here? Oh, okay, this was just nice. So just when I'm with my autistic friends online, off, it's completely different and I feel at home. What else did we get? Any thoughts to any of these? Because I'm just reading them out now, so some great ones.
They're all good, all good.
Yeah, definitely. I think our autistic discovery journey, my dream for that is that we do that privately, but it's in tiers, and that we teach people how to facilitate autistic discovery journey, and then how to create autistic spaces as well, as a part of that. So it's like 3 different courses that we create. So hopefully someday we'll get there and be doing that, because I think I would love to have, like you, Anna, ADJ all over, the UK and then the world, that we have so many autistic spaces we don't know what to do with ourselves, because I think there just needs to be autistic spaces everywhere, so that people don't feel that they're on their own.
That they're the first place that people find, as opposed to NAS or any of the non-autistic led and sort of neurodiversity narrative based spaces and groups and things. Yeah. Not that we're a cult. We're not a cult. We've had a session on cults and I've been assured that it's not cult-like. Just a running joke. People can't tell that I'm joking.
No, it's not a potato cult. No.
So Ben's doing like side eye. I love side eye potato. And Inga, we've got Inga here saying, I get so excited if I come across someone just beginning their journey. And I'm the same, actually. Yes, I get very excited. Like, oh, I'm so glad you've met me, or chatting to me or one of our other autistic people before getting, the other negative narrative, because then you can be like, oh, right, here are some really good resources. Go and look at these great resources or balanced spaces and groups and things. And then Inga says, to be able to introduce them to autistic-led groups / info just feels so good to shortcut away from the wrong messages. Absolutely. Do lots of that, people. Signpost them to Aucademy, signpost them to the local groups that you think are good.
Definitely.
I think it's really important to meet people where they're at right now. So, people come with lots of different needs and lots of different past experiences. And a lot of that is the wrong messages that they've been taught all of their life, pretty much. And to finally find a space where they belong, where they're celebrated, where they're valued for actually who they are, where they don't feel different. Because collectively, we all feel different. But when we're together, then we're all the same, because we all feel different. And I think
I think that's really important, but it's also understanding that sometimes you still feel different in those autistic spaces, and knowing that is actually all right, that there isn't one way to be neurotypical. So you sometimes feel like you've failed at that bit, and then you go into the autistic spaces and sometimes you can feel that almost you don't fit there, but it's understanding and having that support from other people to explore and find who you are, and that it's actually okay. There isn't one way to be autistic either.
I'm sorry I talked over you there. I didn't mean to. I thought you were finished, Victoria. Yeah. So I think that's why it's so important when you're creating these spaces that you create diverse type of activities, so that you're meeting the needs of lots of different type of needs that are out there, for the sensory needs, the people who love to be involved and very physical, other people who are very quiet and much prefer the smaller quiet sessions. So you've got to provide so many different types of opportunities in those spaces, so that it is kind of meeting everybody's needs, but not on the same night. So if you only do this kind of once a week, then it's really difficult to meet all these people's needs. You've got to be providing lots and lots and lots of activities that people can choose to come along to that meet their very specific needs.
And that's why I've just flagged again that, so we acknowledge that actually quite early on. That's why we've got all these different groups. I'm still not sure whose idea about the memes group, but I got very confused about the difference between a meme and an infographic. So I was like, oh yeah, I've got like hundreds of infographics about what it means to be autistic, etc. That'd be a great space. No, it's not that. It's just comedy, isn't it? It's just comedic memes. And those groups have different sort of guidelines. So for instance, the animals group in particular, it states that it's not a support space. So some of our spaces, particularly the social space, is a support space where you can peer support and chat to each other. Whereas the animals group specifically says it's a low energy low spoons group. So people don't necessarily talk to each other. They just share cute pictures of cats and dogs and animals in general, right? So that when you're low on spoons and you just want to look at something cute, you can go to that space and share pictures of animals and things like that. So trying to recognise that we might have different things that we want from those spaces.
Yeah, and I think, one example of that, and just, is that I invented this thing, which is called the overwhelm avoidance device, which is basically a tent that I made into a backpack. It's a very small, weird tent for a toilet when you go camping. So it's quite tall and thin. And a lot of times I'll bring those to the social spaces. And what we've discovered a lot of times is that people love to be in those tents because it's like, they're protected, they're safe, and a lot of times people will stay in a social space in those tents, and it just totally works. And they're like, people get excited about them. It's fun to pop them up as well. But that's something that we're actually doing some workshops, me and Chloe now, but where we've got 3 different people and they were all in the tents the whole session, which was quite cool. But they stayed in the session, which is great. They didn't feel they needed to leave. And
it does amuse me. It's very adorable because they pop their heads out or parts of their head, like a body, and then it just makes me think of snails or turtles. Like they've got this giant tent body almost, which is great.
But yeah, it's dark in there. You feel safe. I don't like feeling like somebody might walk behind me. I like being in the corner. I'm always like that. And, anywhere I go, I'll find the corner. So yeah, just, giving that extra bit of safety to somebody. When we worked in a theater studio space, there used to be black curtains all around the space. And, there was several times where people just sat behind the curtains. They wanted to be there, but that is as close they could get to being there was just to listen and to sit behind the curtain and, feel safe in that way. And that was accepted and totally cool. I remember, and then you'd hear a voice from the curtain every once in a while,
A couple more comments. Let's have a look, and then we can get Ben to ask our 2 final questions, or 2 important questions. So here Ben earlier on was saying the joy of autistic social spaces is the freedom to know you won't be judged for flapping your hands or talking about your interests for half an hour because you can say in some way or another. Because you can in some way or another relate to each other, whereas in neurotypical majority groups you become noticeable and weird. And I kind of you had a different phrase for one of my favorite phrases that I've had since, I don't even know, 2017 or something, is that everybody's weird. Like human beings are weird when you actually think about them. Like look at us and our weird gangly limbs and all this kind of stuff. So humans are weird, everyone's weird. You got to find your group of weird, and then you're not weird anymore. So I think a lot of us have jumped on that.
Yeah, and that's why we really promote, we bring a STEM suitcase and have lots of different objects that people can use. We've realized that it's actually quite helpful for autistic people, STEM for joy, for autistic joy, and to discover autistic joy again. And by having lots of different objects that people can kind of play with that are sensory regulating or sensory seeking, People can try things out and then maybe buy things that might work for them. But we found that stimming regularly is really good for mental health for autistic people. It helps us regulate, and helps us kind of discover that autistic joy that gets kind of dampened down by society. It's okay to stim. It's
absolutely. I always have my little bits of blue tack here, and I've got my little spinners on my desk.
Anna's getting ahead of the key question.
Sorry.
No, but Ben was like, "That's my question." Look, I know. What I was going to say is, whenever now I hear anything that's like that's good for mental health, all I can think about is Victoria's amazing young person, because their amazing young person will say things like pizza is good for mental health and things like that. So anytime I hear that now, all I think of is Victoria's young person, because it's just a great phrase, like so-and-so is good for mental health. And yet chocolate for me is good for mental health, for instance. And our lovely Andrew Morton. Hello, Andrew. Let's just say hello to Andrew in our comment section. Fantastic. I'm just flagging as well for people. So autismmatters.co.uk, which is Anna's organisation or website. And I'm just wondering, there was a couple of people, so like Callum, maybe you want to get in touch with Anna, if that's okay with Anna. So Callum, like say, autistic person, runs other groups in Lincolnshire, might want some advice around, what was it, the sustainability of those social groups financially, for instance, and things like that. So how to make those kinds of spaces.
Brilliant. Yeah, no problem at all. I'd love to speak to people about that.
Yeah, so Callum, there you go. Pop over and chat to Anna. So Ben, thoughts? Where we go?
Yeah, so Ben Anna's a bit more like me.
Ben is asking, what is or are your favourite stims?
Well, I've got a few. Music is my first and foremost favourite stim. But while the whole time I've been sort of making cubes out of blue tack, which I do all the time. I love just making nice cubes all the time. And I've got my little spinners, and I've got my little sensory brain here. I love this. It's a squeezy brain. Can you see?
I need to see it.
I got it from some, actually, I got it from Durham University when I went to have a look at university courses with my daughter. So I just love that, because it's like a stress ball and you can squeeze it all the time. But I just love the fact that it's a brain. I'm really interested in the brain. But music is my number one stim. All the time I have music running through my brain. Anytime people mention things, I've got songs coming into my head regularly, and I use it to help me understand my feelings a lot, so music, kind of when I'm feeling something, I can find a song which explains how I'm feeling, and that really helps me understand how I'm feeling about things and put like a definition to it for me.
Nice. And interestingly, our Tigger of Aucademy is a blue tack cube maker as well. That's that's one of their main stims, is creating little cubes with blue tack and squishing them and things. I'm sure there's somebody else as well that we've had on recently that's a blue tack cube maker.
Yeah. Well, I've got the wonderful thing about Tigger going through my brain now. You know the song.
Yep.
So thank you for that.
I just love that it's his real name. Anyone else in this room got any new stims? Actually, that I love stealing stims. I like to hear what other people's stims are, so I can be like, oh, that's one I haven't tried yet. Anyone got any new things? Victoria,
I do like going to petrol stations as well and smelling petrol. I really love that.
Interesting. Ben, did you nod your head?
I've had a couple consults that like petrol.
Hand gel. Hand gel. The alcohol hand gel.
Whenever I walk past a lavender plant, I always grab a little bit of the lavender and put it in my pocket. And I will just keep it in my pocket until it's washed out, and I'll just kind of smell it, which is quite nice. I like to do that.
That's like we were at, it was like a bar pub thing, weren't we, to do our debriefs after our research workshops, and they had like a herb garden in the pub garden, so we're just like rubbing all the mint leaves and all that kind of thing, because yes, smell is particularly nice. Smells obviously is one of my big stims. I'm very tactile averse, but also tactile seeking, but also smell are my big ones. Victoria, have you got anything new? You've always got new things, I feel.
I can't find the pen top thing that I normally have, which has got like beads on it, and I had it a minute ago, but as usual, totally gone. And it's just twirling it, but this wooden thing, it's just, it fascinates me, and it's trying to get it all lined up, and it's the feel of it, because it's like a natural feeling. It's smooth.
I bought this necklace. Wait. Which is a chewy, but it's a feather, which is quite nice. I like that. I'm not wearing it right now, but yeah, that's quite nice. I like that.
Ben, thinking, have you got any new ones? Not got any new ones, Ben? No. And our lovely Andrew as well was just saying that they like the smell of petrol too, which is good. And Ben, our final question. What is your favourite form of potato? Please think very carefully about this question. So Anna, what is your favourite form of potato?
Unfortunately for me, potatoes can really upset my stomach. But I absolutely love chips. Sorry, I do. I love chips, but I really have to try not to eat them, because I think as I'm getting older, I'm getting more intolerances for certain foods, so I do try and avoid them, unfortunately.
Fair. Ben, still not a guest telling us that Ben is their favourite form of potato.
Oh, sorry, Ben.
But
you do look really good in those headphones, though.
And we do have Bobby saying a hot potato Ben. Yep.
Love it.
So thank you, everybody. Anna, feel free to stay on while we have our outro music. And I believe we have Katie Monday and David Gray Hammond and potentially a number of others talking about substance use and being autistic and otherwise neurodivergent for our next session, I believe. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Awkward wave until the music plays. Feel free. While Chloe tries to find the music.